We appreciate all of the guests who have appeared on our show and sincerely thank them for providing you, our audience, with useful information. However, the advice our guests provide is theirs, and we encourage you to seek out a professional if you have specific questions about any topic we cover on the Crushing Debt podcast. On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast, Bankruptcy for Beginners.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I have a guest on this week's show. Well, to say she's a guest on my show really isn't very accurate. I was a guest on her show, and we took that recording, and I'm releasing it here for you all as this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. So this week's episode is an interview of me by Credit Kristi. Now, a lot of you may remember Credit Kristi. She was on episode 247 of the Crushing Debt Podcast, Credit Coaching by Kristi. She is a mortgage loan officer. She was a short sale negotiator that worked with me at my previous law firm for a few years. She's a credit specialist. She has also started a show, and so I would encourage everyone to check out her show. I'll put the link in the notes here, but she interviewed me about the basics of bankruptcy. And like I said, I then took that content, recorded this introduction, and I'm going to release her interview of me as this week's episode of the podcast. Now, before we get to her interview of me, which is basically all about the basics of bankruptcy in essence, before I get there, I do want to again mention our sponsor, Sam Cohen, our friend Sam Cohen of Attorneys First Insurance. So if you know an attorney or a title company that needs to renew their errors and omissions or their professional liability insurance, Sam is a great resource to have. He can give you an apples to apples comparison. And so again, a great way to support me, a great way to support the show is to support our sponsor by introducing an attorney or a title company that you know to Sam Cohen at Attorneys First Insurance. He can be reached at sam@attorneysfirst.com or www.attorneysfirst.com. And again, he's a great friend of the show, and he's a great resource to attorneys and title companies all over the country, although I know right now he's focused on Texas and Florida. So with that, I'll do my sign off now, which is that I hope you have more money at the end of the month rather than more month at the end of the money. And now is Credit Kristi's interview of me. I hope you enjoy.
Hey friends, it's Kristi, your credit coach. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. Today, I am ecstatic to introduce you to somebody who has actually been an integral part in my professional life, although he doesn't probably know the extent of it. And I was on his podcast last year. We had a ton of fun. And so it was time to get together again. I'd love to introduce you to Sean Yesner of Yesner Law. He has been an attorney since 2004, and he's had this law firm just celebrated his 9th year anniversary. He has a Crushing Debt podcast that he has over 5 years worth of episodes. You guys, he just launched episode 287. I can't wait to grow up and be like you, Sean. I have 50 something so far, and it's a ton of work and a ton of fun. But when we get to hear from the people that listen into our content and they tell us that this information has changed their lives, or they've got some questions and we're able to assist them, it just feels so good, right? It's like, it's worth it.
Yeah. I love doing the show and providing the information. And I remember right when I first started the show, right when my show was about where yours is now, I was wearing a branded logo shirt for the law firm, a lot like I'm wearing now, although I don't know if people are going to see this, but I had the name of the law firm sort of on the back, like underneath where the collar is. And I'm out to dinner with my family here in the neighborhood, and someone taps me on the shoulder and says, "Are you Sean?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "I listened to your show and it's great." I was totally blown away. I wasn't even a year in yet, and they just saw the Yesner Law on the back underneath the collar and listened to the show. I don't even know how they found it, but that was one of those super cool experiences that I'll never forget. That, you know, the fact that you put these podcasts out and you wonder, but the fact that one person listens is really all it takes to make a difference.
Oh, I love that story. And I mean, last year we recorded one episode together, and I was telling you as we were getting set up, I had somebody reach out to me in a messenger on Facebook and said, "Hey, I listened to you on the Crushing Debt podcast." And he had some questions for me, which is super cool. So Shawn Yesner is an attorney specializing in bankruptcy, although he does a lot of other things. When I worked for Shawn's law firm, gosh, so many years ago, it was back in 2008 for a couple of years, I was a short sale negotiator and got to help hundreds of families avoid foreclosure, help them get that next chapter started. And I just learned so much from you. And I love the content that you put out. You spend so much time really just interviewing, educating, asking questions of other people, and bringing amazing information to your listeners. So if you haven't checked it out already, do go and listen to his podcast, Crushing Debt. He's been at it for 5 years, so there's a lot of amazing content in there. And Shawn is out of the Tampa Bay area, but he serves the whole state of Florida. So if you've got any questions, check out his website at yesnerlaw.com. I'll make sure to put a link in the comments, but it's YESNERlaw.com. So without further ado, Shawn, let's dive into it, because I know I've had a couple of questions from listeners that I have, clients that I have, and I am not an attorney. And I'd love to just ask some questions where you can speak to it. Now, just for our listeners, he's not giving legal advice. Got to put that disclaimer out there, but I'm just going to ask some general questions to where we can get some information that could potentially help you. And if you do have questions about bankruptcy specifically, I believe they can reach out to you for a consultation if they're in the state of Florida, right, Shawn?
Yeah. So bankruptcy is federal court. So I'm licensed anywhere in the state of Florida. I can practice in any state court in the state of Florida. When you talk about bankruptcy, that's federal law. Florida's broken up into three: the northern, the middle, and the southern districts of Florida. Now, I happen to also be licensed in all three federal districts as well. I try to keep the bankruptcy footprint to Tampa just because, although now with Zoom and phone and whatnot, it may not matter as much. But back in the day, I just didn't want to drive to Orlando and Jacksonville and Miami and whatnot for all these hearings. So I try to keep the footprint to Tampa. But yeah, I can answer questions about bankruptcies pretty much anywhere in the state of Florida.
Outstanding. Well, I've got a couple of questions ready for you. So the first one is probably the most pressing question for most people if they are considering, and it's wild because I was speaking to a prospect here 20 minutes before you and I got on the phone. She told me her bankruptcy was just discharged 2 years ago last month, and it was for $20,000 in debt. And of course, I have some thoughts in my mind about that. So the question I want to ask and start off with is, how much debt do I need to file bankruptcy?
Yeah, it's a good question. And that's a question that I get asked all the time. And when I say to them, well, how much debt do you have? I can actually see the gears turning in their head where they're thinking, do I want to tell Shawn honestly how much I have, or do I want to make up a number? And so I will tell you, the most I've ever heard somebody say is $15 million in debt.
Oh, heavens.
So if someone says I got 20 grand, I got 100 grand, I got 500 grand, I've heard more. But my general comment is you need to have more debt than you can reasonably afford to repay. So, or more debt than you can afford to pay in a reasonable amount of time. So somebody with $20,000 in debt, if they make $40,000 a year, they're not going to be able to pay it back. Bankruptcy probably would be a good option for them. Somebody with $20,000 in debt that makes $200,000 a year, probably bankruptcy is a bad option. And the same, somebody with $100,000 in debt that makes $50,000 a year. Yeah, bankruptcy is probably good. Somebody with $100,000 in debt that makes $2 million a year, just pay it back. So it's all going to depend on, can you reasonably, or can you afford to pay it back in a reasonable period of time? I think is how I would judge it.
And everybody's situation is different, to your point right there. So it makes a lot of sense to me. So there's 48 million people walking around with student loan debt. And I know a lot of our listeners are in that age group where they might just be one of that 48 mil. So let's talk about student loan debt and how that ties into bankruptcy.
Yeah. So actually this latest episode that I just put out, the 287, was with an attorney called Kristi, or named Kristi Arkovich. And Kristi's here in the Tampa Bay area, and she probably knows more about student loans than almost any attorney in the area. And she's been on my show a whole bunch of times talking about student loans. Student loans is sort of a weird creature because it used to be that only federal student loans were non-dischargeable. Private student loans were. Then the bankruptcy code was amended to say all student loans are non-dischargeable. So meaning they're not affected by the bankruptcy, but they are treated the same as other unsecured creditors. So if I have a bankruptcy that's going to pay my unsecured creditors 20% of what they're owed, for example, and the student loan creditor files a claim, the student loan creditor is going to get 20% of what they're owed. When the bankruptcy is over, the remaining 80% will still be owed. So they still get paid based on what the other unsecured creditors get. And if the unsecured creditors get zero, then the student loans get zero. And when it's over, they're owed 100%. But there are dozens of ways to address student loans inside and outside of bankruptcy. We've got something called a hardship discharge. And so somebody that finds themselves really in a bad way, somebody that has a medical issue or a medical condition or some type of issue that's going to prevent them from working, we might be able to ask for what's called a hardship discharge. We might be able to get those student loans discharged anyway because of the disability or the issue that the borrower is facing, the debtor is facing. Plus all the federal student loans. We've still got CARES Act, from COVID factors in there. We've got all kinds of other programs. There was recently what I was interviewing Kristi Arkovich about was if you qualify for Social Security disability, now you also automatically qualify for a federal loan for a hardship discharge outside of bankruptcy of that student loan if you're already getting Social Security disability. If you're not getting Social Security disability, but you might qualify, then you may also qualify for a hardship discharge. There's forbearance plans, there's repayment plans, there's all the public service loan forgiveness programs. There's the income-driven repayment plans. I mean, there's literally dozens of ways to potentially attack a student loan, whether inside or outside of bankruptcy.
Excellent. Well, so that's amazing to know. I didn't know all of those options existed. So it's incredible to hear that. And you taught me something huge about if you're receiving Social Security disability, that there's some additional options available to you as well. So I love this information. It's super. So so my next question is bankruptcy the only option for somebody who's facing debt?
Yeah, no, it's not. And something that I try to be in my practice, I'm a bankruptcy attorney. There's no way around that. I help people file for bankruptcy, but that's not necessarily the only option. I mean, going back to your first question, if somebody came to me with a $20,000 debt, in fact, I think I have this happen all the time. People come to me with debt, and for whatever reason, they cannot file bankruptcy. They make too much money. They have too much in assets. Maybe they own their own successful business, or maybe they just have a lot of stuff where they wouldn't be able to file bankruptcy because they have too much in assets or too much in income. Well, then, yeah, we'll negotiate a payment plan with the credit, or maybe even a lump sum payoff. Or maybe we can, if the creditor makes a mistake in the way that they try to collect the debt, maybe we can use that as leverage. So even though I am a bankruptcy attorney, bankruptcy is not the only tool in the toolbox. There are other ways to help clients negotiate away the debt, whether that be lump sum, whether that be payment plan, some combination of both, whatever the situation may be. Yeah, we use all kinds of stuff to help eliminate debt, not just bankruptcy.
Incredible to know that there's options. So what is the difference then between secured and unsecured debt, and how are those treated inside of the bankruptcy process?
So secured debt, think of stuff like your house, your mortgage, your car. You go to Rooms to Go and you finance the furniture with Rooms to Go. In other words, secured basically means the money that I borrowed is tied to the asset that I bought. where unsecured, think credit cards, hospital bills, student loan debt, sometimes IRS debt, although the IRS can file a lien and be secured against your home. But that's typically the difference. Unsecured are things that are not tied to any particular asset, where secured debt is tied to a particular asset. And that does impact, if we're looking at a bankruptcy, what chapter of bankruptcy or what's the goal. When you and I work together, and I still to this day do a lot of foreclosure defense, although foreclosures are just now firing up again with the end of the moratorium. But, that was really the first question I would ask potential clients is, what do you want to do with your home? And if they said, I want to keep my house, well, that's one set of strategies. If they say, I want to get rid of my house, that's a totally different set of strategies. Short sales versus loan mods versus, are we going to do a chapter 7? Are we going to do a chapter 13? There's all kinds of different options in there. So that's, the type of debt that you have is going to potentially determine what we do to help. Because if you've got a secured debt, you're coming to us because you're in foreclosure and we recommend a chapter 7, you may lose the house. So we don't want to do that. So we would instead recommend like a chapter 13. But if you come to us with only unsecured debt, I got overloaded on my credit cards and they're all suing me and I need to get rid of it. Well, maybe chapter 7 is a great thing. Or maybe you make too much money, so we do a chapter 13. But that distinction between secured and unsecured a lot of times is going to drive where we go as a resolution.
So a couple things out of that. A chapter 7 can wipe the slate clean, and a chapter 13 can essentially have you on like a structured repayment plan.
Yeah, they both wipe the slate clean. They just do it in a different way. So chapter 7 is what most people think about. Chapter 7 is liquidation. Chapter 7 is I'm wiping my hands clean. The debt's gone. Chapter 7 takes less time from start to finish typically. Where chapter 13, like you said, is a payment plan, and it's either a 3 or a 5-year payment plan. And the way that I describe it is we first look at your income. And so if you are above a certain income level, the bankruptcy trustee is going to require a chapter 13 and you're going to have to pay back. So if I had, let's say I had, try to make the math easy. Let's say I had $100,000 in debt. And let's say that I had $500 left at the end of every month after I pay all my expenses. Well, I would have to do a 5-year, 60-month chapter 13 bankruptcy plan. So 500 times 60 months is $30,000. I owe 100, so I'm paying back 30% of my debt. And when I'm done paying the $500 a month for 30 months, the bankruptcy's over. That $70,000 of debt is eliminated by the bankruptcy court. Now, if my budget shows that I don't have any money left at the end of the month and my assets are all exempt or my assets are all protected by Florida law, then my creditors get nothing. I can file a chapter 7 and probably within about 5 or 6 months, it's over.
And I've seen bankruptcies for all different kinds of reasons. Unforeseen medical bills that are just so exuberant. What can one do? But I've also seen where, it's a mismanagement of funds. I started off with a credit card when I was a teenager. I got buried under a whole bunch of credit cards, and, divorce sometimes can cause somebody to have to face a bankruptcy because there's no other way to get out of the debt. So there's all sorts of different reasons why somebody might be facing that. So it's refreshing to know that there's options out there that can actually almost be custom tailored, right, for somebody. Yeah.
Well, and that's, when we were dealing with foreclosures and loan mods and short sales and back in the bust, back in the Great Recession, 2008 to 2014-ish, and people were saying, we need to stop foreclosures. And I kept saying, no, we don't. Not that I guess I do like foreclosures because that's how I feed my family. But, it's not that we can't stop foreclosures. If you want to stop foreclosures, then you stop the things that stop foreclosures. You stop divorces. You stop, you cure cancer. You cure COVID. You stop people from losing their jobs. You stop the breadwinning spouse from dying. You stop that stuff, then you'll stop foreclosures. And I think that's sort of the same analysis in bankruptcy. I mean, a lot of people, they wear it like the scarlet bee, but it's really not. Sometimes bad stuff happens to good people. The bankruptcy code is there to give you a second chance and wipe the slate clean. And I really don't care. I mean, you can sometimes tell somebody, I had the person walk into my office and say, this was back when we were working together. I remember this from back then. They walked in and they said, well, we want to file bankruptcy, but what happens to the $8,000 rims we just put on our new Suburban? And those are the people you don't really, come on, you need to file bankruptcy, but you spent $8,000 on rims. Give me a break, versus the widow that comes in because her husband just died and she hasn't been in the workforce for 10 years. And what am I going to do? And those are the people I'll help them all. Don't get me wrong, but there's different stories there.
There's always different stories for sure. So last couple questions I have for you. What debts can be eliminated or discharged in a bankruptcy?
Pretty much everything. The only things that can't be IRS debt can't be typically. Now there is a test. Sometimes if the IRS debt is old enough, but that's a little bit more of a complicated analysis that we don't have time to go into. But in most cases, IRS debt is not. Student loan debt, like we said, typically is not. The other big one that I see is debt that is incurred by virtue of a DUI or a DWI. So you go out there and you get into a car accident and the plaintiff, the injured party sues you. That debt is totally dischargeable. But if you were drunk, that debt may not be dischargeable. So there's a little bit of a line there, an analysis there. But, pretty much if you incur the debt by virtue of fraud, it's not dischargeable, which kind of makes sense.
I'm so glad for those reasons. Yeah.
A lot of times divorce, so child support and alimony, not dischargeable. But most everything else is. It is a little bit of a factual analysis, and sometimes we'll have to look it up in the bankruptcy code to see what the bankruptcy code says. But for the most part, everything else. Now, the interesting thing, we talked about secured and unsecured. Well, remember, a secured debt is really two contracts. It's the promissory note that says you've agreed to borrow $200,000 to buy this house, and you agreed to repay it over 30 years at 3.5% interest, whatever. And so that's the note. Then there's the mortgage, and the mortgage says, we have a lien on your house, if you don't pay back the note, we can foreclose our lien. Well, the bankruptcy eliminates the note. And so that obligation, that deficiency. So when we would do a short sale and the borrower would be left with a deficiency, that deficiency is eliminated by the bankruptcy. Now, the interesting thing is the mortgage is not. And so the bank will say, fine, we get it. We can't collect. We can't go after deficiency. But if you don't make your payments under the mortgage, we can still foreclose. So a lot of times, getting a little off topic from your question, but a lot of times what we'll do in a Chapter 7, there's something called a Reaffirmation Agreement. And so we will reaffirm that we're going to make those payments under the note if you want to keep your house. But that, that's where the secured versus unsecured analysis may also come into play. So the note on your home, the not the mortgage, but the note on your home is technically dischargeable. But if you don't pay it back, you might still lose your house. So other than that, I mean, it's fairly simple stuff. Credit cards are dischargeable. Medical debt is dischargeable. A lot of those kinds of things, even, a lot of those kinds of things are eliminated by the bankruptcy.
I'm so glad you mentioned about the house, because as a mortgage loan officer, I was hoping you would go there, because that is a very important factor for anybody who owns a home and might be considering bankruptcy. They don't want to be out on the streets, right? So especially if you have equity in your home or you sweat equity, you've poured yourself into this house and you really want it to be your primary residence. It's great to know that there is some protection in there, so it can remain your home. So excellent. I'm so glad that you went that way with it. So last question. And this is actually from one of my listeners. So I'm going to reach out to him because he sent me an email. So I'm going to make sure he listens, especially to this podcast episode. But he had asked me about what can be discharged inside of a bankruptcy when it comes to IRS liens. And I'm sure with this being a federal thing, it's probably going to be a little tricky, maybe some very specifics, but are there some general things that you can share with us about IRS liens?
Yeah, so it's the concept of the IRS debt versus the IRS lien. So let me start with the debt first. The typical, and again, we probably don't have a lot of time to go into this in a lot of detail. So if somebody wants to reach out to me, we can analyze the specific facts. But basically, in order for IRS debt to be dischargeable, it's got to be more than 3.5 years old. So we're sitting here in 2021. Right now, 2020 returns are due, those that were extended. So if you think 20, 19, 18, so 2017 income taxes would be more than 3 years old. At least we passed step one, that those would probably be dischargeable. The next test is they have to be assessed more than 3 years ago. So if I didn't file my 2017 taxes until last year, 2020, then the tax would be assessed in 2020. So even though the 2017 tax is more than 3 years old, it was assessed in 2020. That is not 3 years old. It would not be dischargeable.
Gotcha.
But if I filed my 2017 taxes on time in 2017, now we're beyond 3 years from when they were assessed, and we're beyond 3 years from when they were due. Chances are higher, probably more likely, that they would be discharged. Now, again, there's what we call tolling provisions in there. So tolling when the statute of limitations would stop for certain things. For example, if you're doing an offer in compromise or a payment plan or something like that. So all those different types of factors have to be taken into account. But the general rule is if the tax is more than 3 years old and it was assessed more than 3 years ago, there's a good chance it's dischargeable. If it's not paid, the IRS can then put a lien on the house. Now, the IRS is one of those entities that gets around the Florida homestead laws. So under the Florida homestead laws, no creditor. So if I don't pay my Visa bill, they can't take my house away from me. The only creditors that can take my house away from me under Florida law, the mortgage company that gave me a mortgage to buy it. So if I have two houses and I have a Bank of America loan on my house where I live, and I have a Wells Fargo loan on the investment house, and I default on the investment house, Wells Fargo can't take my homestead house. They can take the investment property, but they can't take the homestead. Bank of America, if that's the company that I have, and I don't, but if that's the company that I had my loan with, they could take my house away if I didn't pay that mortgage. So mortgage companies can take your house away. The contractor that does something to your house, I hire someone to fix the roof. I hire someone to put on an addition. I just about to hire a painter to get rid of some homeowner association violations. Those guys can put liens on my house. The property tax collector trumps everybody. They can put a lien on my house, and the IRS. So those are the only four. So then we get into the IRS liens. There's a couple different things we can do there. So we can look at, is there any equity in the house? If there's no equity in the house because the first mortgage sucks up all that equity, maybe we can negotiate with the IRS to remove the lien, or maybe within bankruptcy, we can fight with the IRS that the lien doesn't apply. But I think we can also do that outside of bankruptcy. And I've done a lot of times outside of bankruptcy where I have the homeowner come to me and say, look, I'm selling, I'm refinancing, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I have an IRS lien against the house. What can we do? And we just treat the IRS lien like a short sale. So there's an application that the IRS has. It's a fill in the blank form that the IRS has on its website. We fill that out. We get the appraisals. We get the tax collector and property appraiser and property assessor information. We get the preliminary HUD from the title or settlement statement or closing disclosure or whatever from the title company. we put all that together. Now, the problem there is, let's say that it's a $200,000 house and $175,000 first mortgage. So there's only $25,000 of equity there, and forget closing costs for purposes of the example. And let's say the IRS is owed $50,000. Well, best we're going to be able to do is go to the IRS and say, would you take the $25,000 that's left and get rid of the lien? And in most cases, they will, although that doesn't get rid of the debt. So the IRS gets $25,000, the lien is gone. The borrower or the taxpayer still owes the rest to the IRS. And so that I would then say, maybe go to the IRS with an installment plan, a payment plan, some kind of offer and compromise plan. And that's how I would attack IRS liens.
Awesome. I've learned so much just now. And I don't even know if I'm going to put this part in the in the recording, but and don't answer if you don't want to, but I recall seeing commercials several years back where we'll settle your IRS debt. Does that have to be a certain age before the IRS will even talk to you about settlement?
I don't know. I'd be wary of a lot of those companies. I think the IRS, I don't think the IRS is interested in taking your house away unless you're a famous athlete, a famous star, somebody that they want to make an example out of. But you and me, if we had IRS debt and IRS liens, I think it's a very low percentage chance that the IRS is going to take our house away. Now, again, I did not just say the IRS won't go after you.
Right.
I just said it's a very low percentage that they'll try to take your house. But a lot of times, they're people like we are. They, the IRS, and I frankly, I don't believe that tax revenue is what drives the economy. It certainly helps, but there's all kinds of other, again, too much to get into here. There's all kinds of other economic factors that apply towards, paying the deficit and bringing down the budget and all that kind of stuff. So what I would say is call the IRS. Hey, here's what happened. I got COVID. My spouse died. I lost my job. This, that, the other thing. They may be a little bit more strict than Visa, for example, but I would still call the IRS and say, hey, what can we do? Or call me, or I've got another couple of buddies that's all they do is IRS workouts, and I can refer to them as well. And call one of us and have one of us call the IRS and see. A lot of times they will reduce penalties. That they may knock down interest a little bit. They may take a reduction like any other creditor. They may, because they also understand if I owe the IRS 20 grand and I'm offering them, 12 to pull numbers out of the air. Well, it's much easier to take that 12 and go away than it is to fight over, we want the full 20. And I think the IRS gets that as well.
And who wants to drag it on for all those years as well? So.
Exactly.
Thank you. Next. Well, Sean, this has been amazing. I've learned a lot. I know our listeners have learned a ton. And what's really great is you've got not only the Crushing Debt podcast, but you have an ebook. You've written several books. You've got a ton of information on your website that could help a whole lot of people in a whole lot of situations. So I do want to encourage our listeners to go to yesnerlaw.com. And Sean, as you can hear, is just a caring guy. He knows a whole lot. He's approachable. He'll help you out if he can. And if he can't, he might be able to recommend you to somebody who is a better fit for you. And out of the Tampa Bay area, specializing in bankruptcy, also focused on foreclosure and those kinds of things. Sean Yesner, thank you so much for being my VIP guest with me today. It was awesome to share time with you again. It's awesome to see you again. And I just thank you for being here. And listeners, thank you so much for listening here today. If you have questions, reach out to me at questions@creditkristi.com. And until next time, stay well.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.